Welcome back, everyone. As I said, I hope you got a chance to grab a bite to eat and have a little stretch before our last session. This will be a little more interactive, so hoping to keep you engaged. I'd just like to reintroduce myself. My name's Asha Wareham. I'm a project assistant with BC ACARN, and I'd like to express my gratitude to the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations, on whose unceded traditional and ancestral territory I'm joining you from. And I just like to note that I am situated very near a place called Islemach, which is also known as Jericho Beach in so-called Vancouver, and excited to hear where you are all joining us from. So diving into this last session of the day, no less exciting than the ones that have come before, we're going to have a chance to connect with each other, share some of our experiences, and discuss ideas for how research and extension can serve local producers. So to begin this, it's a real pleasure to welcome David Catzel, who's the BC Seed Security Program Manager with FarmFolk CityFolk, who will spend the first 20 minutes of this hour presenting on a really great example of collaborative research. And that's something I'm sure a few of you are familiar with. It's called CANOVI, the Canadian Organic Vegetable Improvement Project. And this is a really a deeply collaborative initiative that demonstrates how farmer-partnered variety trials can play a real critical role in improving climate resilience in vegetable production, whether that's through supporting new varieties or building climate resilient varieties of the future that are regionally adapted. Then after David's presentation, we're going to jump into some questions and some breakout groups for you to connect with each other and share your ideas and experiences on this topic. I will note that David's portion of this session will be recorded, so if you miss something, want to revisit it, that recording will be available after the workshop. So without further ado, I'd like to give a really warm welcome to David Catzel, who is a longtime farmer of vegetables, fruits, and seeds for over 20 years prior to his current role as the BC Seed Security Program Manager with FarmFolk CityFolk. In his current position, he's worked very closely with BC farmers and nationally through the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security, helping manage and run variety trials and collaborative breeding projects, among many other supportive programs. So a real figurehead in BC Seeds. We're so grateful to have you here, David, and I'll let you take it away.
Well, thanks so much. I was going to introduce myself, but I don't need to anymore. Now you know me. I will say I work with FarmFolk CityFolk, who is one of the oldest and largest food and agricultural charities in BC. And we work with not just farmers, but we work with eaters, we work with chefs, we work with academics, policymakers, other stakeholders, all together to cultivate food systems that are strong, sustainable, and equitable and resilient in BC. I'm going to be talking about increasing climate resilience through farmer-partnered variety trials, and those often lead to what I'm mostly excited about is participatory breeding projects. As my role as a farmer prior to this job, I'll say that the type of variety trials I used to run was I would buy a new variety, I'd plant 20 feet of it in my field, I'd look at it, and if it did well, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll grow it again, and if it didn't, I wouldn't grow it again. And that's not really a variety trial, and there's not really amazing data gathered. So I'm going to introduce you to what I think is a much more robust way of running variety trials. So through the BC Seed Security Program, this is sort of a flow chart of some of the partners we work with. We are a provincial organization, FarmFolk CityFolk, and the Seed Program, but we do work nationally through the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian Seed Security, through other provincial partners and other provincial programs. But what I'd like to highlight here is farmers are the center of all that we do. They are the ones, after all, growing our food for us, and I believe the most important in this area. So trials, variety trials. What are trial goals, and why would you run a trial? There's lots of different reasons for running a trial, and I'm gonna just run down a few of these reasons with some examples of trials we've run in the past. So one, sometimes it's about introducing or promoting a new crop to an area. So we did this for a number of years with radicchio. Radicchio was not a crop that was grown that much in British Columbia, And we've seen huge uptake of it since we've been running trials and programs around it. It's an incredible crop, certainly for the lower mainland for season extension. It has very little pests. You can plant it at the very end of your season. Your harvest window goes well into November, December, and with some protection, even on a cold year like this, you might even get it to go all the way through till now. Sometimes it's about identifying varieties that are disease or pest tolerant, like we saw with our radicchio trials. We saw some radicchio varieties much more susceptible to clubroot than others. With some potato participatory breeding work, we saw some potato selections that melted with blight and others that grown right beside those plants just powered right through them. So it's really interesting to see that. Identifying superior tasting plants. We are always interested in taste because if it doesn't taste good, it's going to be pretty hard to sell to your customers. Um, Yields are often very important, as well as vigor and weed competitiveness, especially when we're breeding and working with varieties for organic systems that don't, they have to outcompete the weeds. You can't be spraying any herbicides on the weeds. So we saw this some of the wheat breeding work that we did collaboratively with farmers. Um, Sometimes it's identifying harvest windows. So for that radicchio trial, for example, we trialed I'd say over 30 different varieties of radicchio, and they all have slightly different planting times depending on when you want to harvest them and harvest times. So it was sort of just to assess that. Sometimes it's identifying varieties that perform well in certain production systems. So if you want to grow peppers, sweet peppers outdoors in the lower mainland, um, it's often not that easy to do if you're not growing them under cover. So we've tested that through variety trials. Identifying varieties with diverse genetics or certainly climate adaptable genetics is really important these days. Last year, we started a heat tolerant lettuce trial, and we'll be repeating that again this year. What I will say about all these trials, we never do these trials for 1 year. We always do them for multiple years. And for example, the lettuce trial for the farmers that grew them in Ontario last year, they had no heat pressure. It was one of the coolest summers that they've seen in a long time. So we didn't really get good data on heat tolerance of lettuce in Ontario this year. We had some good data from British Columbia in the past year. But this is the reason why you need to repeat these trials for multiple years. And certainly breeding work to identify the performance of breeding projects. So once these trials move from trialing to breeding projects, we always want to be reintroducing those breeding projects into trials to see how they're competing with the best varieties. And I'll say after 6 years of carrot breeding, we've now come up with a red carrot that really doesn't bolt that much in the summer, and our orange carrot did really well compared to the best hybrids on the market last year. So we're really happy to see that happening. So how to design a trial is really important. And again, like I said, as a farmer in the past, I used to think that a trial was just planting 20 feet of a crop, and if it didn't do well, then I wouldn't even bother again. But doing this collaboratively with the support of trial managers and other farmers and researchers to help crunch the numbers it's crucial to be able to gather really good data. But what a trial looks like is different on different sites. So this is a basic layout of a triplicate trial. So this is a blind trial. You don't know the names of the varieties because we are biased if we know what the varieties are that we're trialing. Um, you always plant a border crop. This is if this is laid out in the soil in a field, you can see at the bottom we're going from a clay to a clay loam to a loam soil. So the varieties are tested along different soil types and they're repeated 3 times. This is really an onerous trial, and we don't ask farmers to do this. This is an example of a single replica trial, more varieties. There's 8 varieties, but you're only planting them each once. It still is, obviously, if you imagine these are 8 different varieties of carrots, To ask a farmer to plant 8 different varieties by hand in a field and then go back and assess them, it's a lot more work, obviously, than running down the bed with a seeder. The farmers in the trials do get to sell the crop, but we also provide them with a stipend and honoraria. We pay them a certain amount, even if they plant the crop, even if it fails. But if they are able to complete gathering data, then they get paid more for it. And and this is a little bit lower barrier type does the trial layout for farmers, so it's not so onerous. Um, and if you did this on your farm, you'd get pretty decent data, especially if you repeated it over a few years. So if you did it by yourself, you would probably be able to gather good data. But doing this in collaboration with 20 other farmers across BC, 50 across Canada, and it being replicated at 3 different research sites in triplicate gives us really good data. So this is the design of the trials that we've decided to do through the Canovi program. We call them mother-baby trial designs. So you have the farms are baby sites. They only plant a single plot of each variety. And the research centers, which I think there were about 3 or 4 of them last year, one of them being up at UBC Farm, they plant the trial multiple times and they're randomized design. And so we're comparing that data with the data that we see on the farms. Farmers are able to, we use a trial app called SeedLink. So the farmers can enter their data directly into this app and they're able to look at the data they entered and compare it to the average of the other farmers so they can see how the trials did on their farm compared to other farms. Um, and it's been really very useful to have that app, as well as the expertise of the academics and the academic institutions. We have a postdoc that we're working with at UBC. We've worked with professors in different universities who are replicating these trials, and they're the ones looking at the data and crunching the numbers. They're looking at weather events across the country and how that is affecting the trial, and we're getting really good data and results because of those collaborations. Um, so this is just a picture of us at the Research and Education Seed Farm out in Abbotsford, looking at the rutabaga trials from a number of years ago. We'd lay them out and assess them. And this is on the same farm site. I believe that maybe the year prior to the rutabaga trials, or the same year, we were testing these orange storage carrots, and you're evaluating them for various traits. So when the farmers are evaluating them, they're walking out into the field. They're not necessarily doing the flavor test, obviously, in the field, but they're looking at uniformity, things like the length of production and the harvest windows. For our red carrots, bolting sensitivity was really important. Cold hardiness, or for the lettuce trials we're doing over the next few years, heat tolerance, obviously. Storage ability, we don't always ask the farmers to do that. Again, we're hoping the farmers are able to sell the crop, and most of them aren't storing the carrots. So we will do that at a research site instead. Vigor, canopy closure for carrots is really important to be able to deal with weed competition. And so these are sort of the traits that we look to gather. And we usually come up with the crop that we're decide to trial and the traits that we're looking for in collaboration with farmers by putting out a number of different surveys prior to even choosing the crop. So we know that right now farmers are very interested in trialing. I believe spinach was high on the list, bok choy, cabbage was of interest, and then we're continuing again with the lettuce and carrots as well. Tasting trials are often something we do in collaboration with restaurants. It helps bring this work to the public. It helps promote the type of work we're doing with chefs. It helps connect farmers with the chefs, and increases their desire to purchase locally grown produce. And it really helps the public see the diversity of crops that are out there. Other than the most the foodies out there, a lot of them don't know that carrots come in different colors other than orange. Everybody loves a good tasting trial. We've done tasting trials publicly with beets, carrots, rutabaga, watermelon, and even for some of those who wanted to take part, hot peppers. The evaluation at the end of the trials looks something like this. There's a whole series of graphs. We find it fair, we try to make it really easy for the farmers to access the data. We also run a series of usually online workshops with the researchers that are able to, the farmers can ask questions of the researchers and as they present the data. And it's really necessary to have those expertise to evaluate the data and get good data collection tools. So my favorite part of this is how trials lead towards participatory plant breeding work. And I've been amazed at the acceleration of some of these projects and how fast they've accelerated. And why is it that we decide to do it in a participatory way with farmers? Basically, it just works. Farmers know what these crops should look like in the fields. They're the experts at it. There's not a lot of really great public breeding work in British Columbia or in Canada. There's no public breeding programs, and this is a way to hopefully start that. So research extension, this sort of fits together with this breeding work by bringing together not just all the farmers who are interested in the new crop, but the experts that can help us make the selections for future varieties. So this picture on the left is Dr. Phil Simon. He is a public plant breeder with the USDA, and we brought him up here for the BC biennial seed gathering this past November. He delivered a hands-on training for farmers about carrot selection. The carrots he's selecting were grown by a farmer organically in the Lower Mainland who provided us with about 200 pounds of red carrots to do some selections from. The picture on the right is from Forest Bauer Family Farm out in Chilliwack. We drove out there with the researcher that year and the plant breeder to do selection right on the farm and help train the farmers into they know how to select a carrot for sale, but there's other things that you would look for in terms of selecting a carrot to plant to make seed for future generations of this new crop. So we bring together the best practices and share information between breeders and farmers. And we've had some really great support from the Ministry of Agriculture in the past, and hopefully will in the future. And again, just farmers know how these crops work best in their systems, and we're able to select these crops in their systems, which is really important. Another program we ran for about 6 years was actually a PPB program on wheat. We did wheat, oats, and potatoes, and some of the results were incredible. So you'll see from this graph, some of the farmer selections outcompeted conventional checks. And when I say conventional checks, we're trying to choose those varieties that are grown the most on farms in Canada, the ones that produce the best, that have been commercially bred and are registered varieties in Canada. What I will say about this is that in the areas that these variety trials were done, where the plants got everything they needed, where there was irrigation and lots of fertility, the conventional checks actually outperformed the farmer selections. But in the areas where there was some lack of fertility, drought episodes, and this is more commonly the case in actual fields throughout the country, and will probably continue to be more so the case. Those farmer selections that were selected in those situations outcompeted the conventional Czech varieties, because those Czech varieties, which are not bred in a participatory way with farmers in their fields, are bred by companies to produce the best yield given the best conditions. And that isn't the reality of where these crops are grown. So we saw amazing results from the wheat, especially, but as well from the oat project as well. And in the Lower Mainland, actually, one of the farmers that were involved in this wheat program, the variety he selected is now one of the main varieties that he grows for sale. So this was, I feel like, was a really amazing outcome of some of this work. And so I'm just going to finish this with a few fun photos. and invite you to reach out if anybody is interested. We do have sort of somewhat limited funding right now, so we're only running the trial, the heat tolerant lettuce trial, with 50 participants, and we're offering it first to the participants from last year. But if anybody is interested in collaborative breeding work or variety trials in the future, please reach out to me through FarmFolk CityFolk. This is a picture of some of the carrot lines that we've been working on. Fantasia carrot lines came through our partner, the Organic Seed Alliance in the United States. The red carrot population, we've been working on a red carrot that doesn't bolt in our climates, and the orange carrot we've been comparing to Bolero, which is a hybrid carrot that's fairly well, well received and grown by a lot of farmers for an orange storage carrot. We've done some beets that came out of, we have a few farmers in the lower mainland working on a striped gold, a gold red beet cross, and then all kinds of other weird breeding projects that might be of interest to people. And what we're able to do is kind of create some of these very diverse breeding lines and then share them out with farmers who then can take them on their own and decide what direction to go with them, or to breed them collaboratively with a group of other farmers. But by creating these sort of mixed lines to begin with, we save farmers a lot of time in actually crossing different varieties together. So this watermelon, for example, was a cross between Blacktail Mountain Sugar Baby and Early Moonbeam, two short season and small pink varieties and one yellow variety. And it's been grown for about 5 generations now, so there's some really good mixing, and farmers can take it and select it as they please. So just in conclusion, I'll just say that these variety trials have helped lead to the adoption of varieties of new crops that perform better in a changing climate, and they engage the public and the industry purchasers like restaurants that lead to new participatory breeding projects. They center farmers as the experts that they are, with the support of academics and other plant breeders, that lead to the creation of crops for future with climate flexible genetics. BC and Canada, like I said, does lack a robust public breeding program, and hopefully these trials are a great way to start building that up. It would be amazing to see this continue. This work needs the help of large groups of farmers that are supported and managed by academics and other industry experts. And FarmFolk CityFolk has been delivering this program, as well as other on-farm knowledge exchange activities around cover cropping and climate resilient farming practices, and managing these trials over a decade and breeding programs for the last decade. We've learned a lot along the way. There's still lots to learn. Breeding work is very long-term work. Seed work is long-term work. It's great that the ministry has a 5-year budget, but we're talking about a 20-year programs and projects here. So we look forward to continuing to deliver these in the future, and look forward to your questions and conversation over the next 45 minutes.
Amazing. Thank you so much, David. I am such a fan of this project, and I think I speak for a lot of producers when I say that it's not just about having trial results, although of course this is a super important thing for vegetable producers, but it's also having a community of growers to work with on these really top issues as we try to navigate hotter summers and bolting crops, and needing to replace varieties in the seed catalogs as we do every year. So thank you so much for giving us a light into really what's a flagship project for collaborative research. Okay, so for the audience, I'd love to open it up to a few questions before we head into breakout groups. And David, I'm just going to start with a question where we have someone asking what the difference is between the term for foundation growers for certified seed in contrast to participatory plant breeding, like what differences and similarities there are. I think foundation growers is more applicable maybe to like grain or forage sectors, but yeah, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I have some comments, but that's a bit complicated question.
Yeah.
Through Bauta, we do work with a policy analyst, and we do have somebody working on not so much seed policy, but other food policy in FarmFolk CityFolk. It's definitely different depending on the crop you're working with. So for vegetables, there isn't really a registration system. So if you create a new variety of beets, for example, you can sell a new variety of beets. You can make up a name and you can put it out there. There's not a registration system. For the grower, for example, who bred his own wheat variety, if he wants that to be a registered wheat variety, it's a very lengthy and expensive process that I don't know that if he's willing to go through. He's allowed to grow the variety and sell it himself as a product, as an end product. He might not be able to make a name and sell it as that name, certainly not the seed as that name, but he can sell the product, and all he's interested in doing is having people eat.
Mhm.
So for him, it doesn't really matter that it's a registered variety. He's now developed a variety that grows better on his farm than anything else that he had access to. So that's what's important for him.
Mhm.
But we do, through our program, we do work with the policy analysts. So for example, there is somebody that in the lower mainland who did develop a potato variety that he is interested, or they are interested in registering, and we have helped him sort of work on navigating that system of how to get it registered. But it's a lengthy, expensive process for sure.
For sure. Okay. Thanks for your response on that. And one more question. Do you see whether within this program or maybe within like the wider seed community in BC, is there a prospect for non-farmer participants to get involved with growing different crops, participating in variety trials, whether that's school gardens or 4-H clubs, home gardeners? Where can they fit into this research?
Yeah, actually, if they're interested, go to our website, farmfolkcityfolk.ca. We have a program called the Citizen Seed Trial. So far, I think there's almost 200 people signed up. This year, we are trialing, oh, am I remembering right? Cilantro, kale, and maybe something else that's slipping my mind, but this is a trial for backyard gardeners to take part in. Um, it's not, we don't necessarily work with the researchers. The data is a little bit less important, but still somewhat valuable. But it's a great way to engage. And we certainly have had, last year we had, I think, 30 different school groups involved in that program. And yeah, we look forward to having more people sign up for that for sure.
Fantastic. So really it's a place for everyone to get involved in BC seed security. And we encourage you to get involved with this amazing program.
Mhm.
Thank
And
you.
then for the public as well, look out for tasting trials. Those are always a great fun way to help give some good valuable data.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to give us one more question before moving into breakouts. Um, Within your work, is there any comparisons with heritage, native, landrace, heirloom, or open pollinated varieties which currently exist to see what benefits there might be? And, you know, between year to year, will it ever become open pollinated? I think that's a bit of a long question, but yeah, I guess just what's your comment on with these kind of breeding lines that you're making? How do you approach things like landrace or heirloom varieties?
These are all these are all open pollinated varieties we're working on. We don't tend to work on hybrid varieties. It might be possible in the future. We're not interested. The only type of hybrid variety we'd be interested in is open source available for the public hybrid varieties. And if people understand hybrids, you need to maintain two parent lines. So those both would have to be publicly accessible in order for it to be a public variety. We work with open pollinated varieties. Most of those come from parent lines that are or were heirlooms in the past. Um, some heirlooms from the past aren't really great producers anymore. They have amazing characteristics, but what we talk about producing are heirlooms of the future. So taking those amazing characteristics and making sure that they
Mhm.
continue to evolve with our changing climate. So that's what we think of ourselves as doing is producing heirlooms of the future. The other thing I'll say about that is like over the last 150, 200 years, almost all of the research and energy and resources have been put into hybrid and genetically modified production of seeds. And there hasn't been a lot of work done on open pollinated varieties. There's no reason why open pollinated varieties can't be competing with all of the hybrids and GMOs that we have today. We just haven't had the resources to do so. So hopefully with all this work and this collaboration, we can again create open pollinated varieties that we can all have access to, publicly own and save seeds from, that will compete with the best modern hybrids.
Fantastic. Such an important mission. And I just want to applaud all the farmers involved in this work again.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for
Awesome.
all of the work they put in, for sure.
Yeah.